Okay. Okay, in today's class I am going to explain what is scope. So variable scope, that is very important in C language, not only in any language, C, C++, Java, Python, wherever scope is very important term. So that is called variable scope. These all classes are being conducted under my Lakshmi Narayan Krishna Foundation. 3 days of a week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday sharply at 8 p.m. in Zoom platform. So anybody is interested, you can attend my classes. These are very free classes. Okay. So my intention to conduct these classes, especially for rural students who are totally far away from the network centers and they are not affordable to pay extensive classes. So I hope that these classes will be so useful to rural students especially. Okay, scope is what you know. So it is generally, literally, it is related with variables. So whenever we are working with functions, what happened? So generally we will create the variables inside of a function. Okay. So these variables, whatever we create, so how they act, these variables inside of the function, outside of the function. If any variable inside of the function created, if we have created variables inside of the functions, so they can be accessible only inside of the region, inside of the function. If we have created any variables inside of the function, they will be accessed only inside of the function. So that is called scope, local scope. Local scope means what you know, how you are accessing the variables is called scope. How you are accessing the variables in a function, whether you are accessing the variables inside of the function, outside of the function. If you are accessing the variables inside of the function, it is called local scope. Okay. So a variable created inside a function belongs to that class, that function. Okay, it belongs to the local scope of that. Means your local scope means what you know, you are able to access that variables only inside of the function. That's why the term local scope. Okay. So you can use that variables only inside of the function. So that is called local scope. What about, suppose, let us see an example. This is the code we have written. We will practice this code as it is. As I told you that this is the web editor, online web editor. You need not to download any IDE, integrated development platforms, integrated development environments like Visual Studio, Code Blacks, somewhat other, okay, IDEs to practice your code. But you can, without installing online, you can write the code, edit the code and run the code. Okay. So that is very easy without installation of any IDE. So now let us practice this. This is one function created. Okay, the function, this is the function name, void keyword will be used, means this function will not return anything. So this is one variable, integer data type x is equal to 5. This is created inside of the function, so its accessibility is only inside of the function. That's why it's called, its scope is what, local scope. So how to get the print of, this is the format specifier. Okay, on inside of the main function, call that function. So that is happened. So now here, see what happened. Now we will practice this code as it is. Okay, you delete all the code, and so now include stdio. That is very important. Include stdio. What purpose include stdio? So it is a standard input output library which will be used with input output functions. Okay, input function, scanf, output function, printf function. So now first of all we need to create a function in C language, that is void. Void is a keyword, it indicates that the function will not return anything. Keep any name of function, then after any function. Okay, function name is equal to what, school is a function. Okay, function always will be having brackets, that is what, parentheses. Then after flower braces, now inside of this flower brace, okay, So inside of this flower brace, we will create a variable. Int x is what terminate with semicolon. Int data type x is a variable holding assigned with 6 integer value. Now what happened? Now one variable created inside of this function school. Now it can be accessed inside of the function only. So its scope is called local scope. Now how can I access this one? Inside of function, inside of main function. Okay, main function. Okay, this is the main function. Now inside of this function I can call that function print f. In C language, print function will be used to get the printout. We need to use %d, because why %d? Because this percentage passmet specifier indicates that we are working with what? Integer values. So x is holding integer value, so we need to use format specifier, this one. Next is what? You need to one more sentence, that is return 0 indicates that what, you know, it indicates that there is no any, the function is, main function is called, main function is closed. After this statement there is no any statement, it indicates that. Okay, now inside of this main function I have called what? I need to call this function, call that function. Okay, school. Okay, now school function, whenever we are calling this function, under this function whatever the statement is there, so that statement will be called. Okay, now let us see what happened, if I get the result or not. Otherwise I need to write the code, adjust the code. Compilation terminated. Why terminated? Where include stdio. So now why it is not being terminated means, see, this is stdio dot header file. I need to mention here, that is very important. And mistake what is that, you have defined this variable with 6. So you need to keep this statement, cut this statement, and you keep, okay, inside of this function you request for take a printout. Okay, now here you need to call that only what happens, see, x is a variable which is holding 6 value. Now inside of this main function I need to call what? School function. Simply you call that school, okay, function, and terminate with the semicolon. Now run this code and you will get the result. Still you are not getting result. What is why? Because you have not terminated with the semicolon. Okay, terminate with this function with the semicolon. And anything we need to check back that, okay, you are getting this value. Understood that? So what is the meaning of this? It is what? Once the scope of this function is local. Why? Because your variable x is equal 6, it is created inside of the function, so you can call this function inside of the function only. You are calling this inside of main function, so it is called local scope. If I create a variable outside of the function, its scope can be called global scope. Why? Because I can access that function outside of the function. Okay, I can access that variable outside of that, so that is called a global scope. Okay, so now let us create a global variable, so that I can access that variable from outside of the function. Okay, this is called scope, local scope. Okay, so I have explained here. This is called your format specifier D. It indicates the compiler, C compiler, that my dear C friend, we are working with integer values. Okay, so here integer value you can use I also, it's not a problem. I means integer values. Still you will get the result. Okay, still, so either you can use D or I. If you are working with what, you know, if you are working with float numbers, if it is a float 6.5, so 6.6, you need to state it as a float